Look, thank you for joining us this morning. We want to talk about micro markets, so I'd be really interested in your input and your feedback. The view is obviously this is going to have micro markets, something that lots of people will begin to look at more and more, particularly with the uncertainty of how people are going to return to offices. So we really want to explore this and have an open discussion about how we think this may impact the marketplace. What are the issues that we need to think about as we look at this concept? What are the barriers? What are the opportunities? And also, how do we think it may evolve as the market progresses? So I'm going to hand over to Anthony in a second just to do an opening presentation because they've been doing some work in this area. And I'm going to bring Maria in from a consultancy point of view to give some views as well. And then we'll open up into a open discussion if that's okay. Anthony, over to you.
Thanks, Chris. I'll just share my screen if that's okay, Lauren. There we go. Hopefully everybody can see that. So thanks, Chris, again, and Lauren. So yeah, absolutely. Micro markets is something that I am hugely passionate about. And I absolutely see this as something that is going to become fundamental in the food and beverage scene in the workplace. I think the traditional vending model as such is very much outdated and very much in need of a refresh. From a market perspective, we don't see any investment going into that market sector at all. We're seeing very much investment going into premium coffee and beverage solutions, and as a part of that, we're seeing very much the whole offering kind of expanding to include healthy and accessible snacks and food items. So from a Liquidline perspective, this is a project that I'm heading up. This is something that we very much see as a collaboration piece with our current contract catering partners, and indeed something that in where we're working with smaller end clients directly, also something that we can present to them. So something that we spent a lot of time in research into the hardware and indeed the software to some extent, something that I'm sure Max will have further points to cover off on. Clearly he's got some great innovations that really jigsaw in nicely with what we're doing. I'm just going to sing through this presentation. Certainly don't want it to be death by PowerPoint, so that we can get through to opening up the discussion as soon as possible. But so really what we're showing here is just demonstrating kind of how we can look at it and manage it from very much from an end-to-end perspective. So right from concept and design, right the way through to delivery, installation, and then ongoing management. So what we're looking at here is absolutely a modular concept. So I think the whole point is that people see micro markets as this big scary thing that they don't know much about and actually how to deliver on it. So what the process that we take them through is trying to simplify all that. So it's kind of module 1, module 2, module 3, and you can kind of build your own concept using the various different modules, and you kind of just scale it up to as big or as little as is required. So these are just kind of some visuals, some graphics. What we're looking to do in turn is to partner with a well-known brand, so that actually is bringing some recognition of the high street into the workplace. So we're in talks currently with a couple of well-known high street names that are looking to get their product into the workplace as a result of the current pandemic, where, for example, Pret, they're a prime example. Everybody is obviously aware of their downturn as a result of workers not being in the workplace environment, but we feel that there's very much going to be an ongoing impact. I'm talking to business leaders on a daily basis, and they're all saying, what can we do to keep staff within the workplace? So once they've actually got their staff to come in to their work office environment, they don't then want them to go out onto the high street and then mingle with, you know, others, and, you know, possibly mix with people that are infected with this wretched virus that we've all been hearing far too much about. So again, just flipping through some of the concepts. So from a branding perspective, we can absolutely work with the client or the caterer, depending on the messaging that they're wanting to get over. So that it might be their own brand, or it might be using the brands that we're working with. We have complete, as I said, end to end. So not only the fridges, the freezers, the racks, the shelving, but also the tills, the technology. And again, this is something that we've been working with Maxwell on, and are looking to develop further, so that we have that whole end to end piece. So again, just some more technical detail around some of the units available. But as I say, look, I'm really kind of just wanting to give a very brief overview. Maria, I'd be very glad of your input at this stage, just to kind of flesh out what I've said. Angus, if there's anything I've missed, and then open it out to the wider audience.
Yeah. Chris, do you want me to?
Yeah, please, Maria.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Anthony. Yeah, I think, you know, we're in a changed landscape and a changing landscape. And the problem that we all have is that we don't know what the future is going to hold, or how offices are going to open up again, and when that's going to happen. I know everybody is doing great work to put their stake in the sand and build consumer confidence. I think Liquidline's, one of their Liquidline's USPs is the modular design that Anthony was just referring to. So it really allows you as contractors or individual businesses to build a micro market that really is fit for purpose, and one that is a solution, whether that's an interim solution and then you need to build on it moving forward. I think one of the other challenges we all face is consumer confidence. Consumer confidence is really low. Micro markets and the very nature of them being self-serve helps build that consumer confidence. And talking with Maxwell yesterday and Anthony, you know, Dynamify would help that even more. So I think that there is real opportunity for the micro market in any workplace, but now more than ever. And I know that Anthony and Angus are ready to go now. And they're having really interesting conversations with people around a high street food offer. But maybe in some cases, that is what would be required with a contract caterer. So I think there is a bigger discussion that Anthony and Angus will have with potential contract catering partners as they move forward. But I think it's a really interesting topic, and one that I'm hearing that is of more and more interest, both from contract caterers and clients. Max, what's your thoughts on the sort of tech piece of supporting?
Sure. So, yeah, I guess just quickly. So, again, so everybody knows. So, yeah, we're Dynamify. We sit behind the scenes. We're invisible to the customer. And essentially what we do is we build online ordering platforms for contract caterers. And one of the modules of that platform is what we call mobile self-checkout, or scan and go. And we're doing this in sites like Sodexo and Elior and CH&Co, Bartlett Mitchell, etc. And I think the kind of opportunity here is a lot of contract caterers for a while have wanted to be able to get cash and cashiers out of their business. Yeah. And I think one of the biggest hindrances has been that both of them are an ingrained habit. And COVID has now meant that the client is up for the change, the customer's up for the change, and the caterer's up for the change. And so really what we see this as is a great opportunity for the contract caterer to make these kind of changes to their business, which have fantastic benefits, such as obviously reducing all your touch points, so it helps you get back to work sooner, but also reducing your cost to serve and the price you need to charge your clients, which is obviously very sensitive to them at the moment. And so really how we're kind of seeing it is in terms of the evolution. At the moment, people are doing whatever they can to stay relevant to their clients, because it's about keeping those contracts, and micro markets really help with that, because you don't need a huge on-site presence. It works really well when you don't have lots of people on site. And then with time, as more and more people are coming back, there are other services that you can have inside that same app that you use in your micro market, such as click and collect for barista made coffee, such as delivering in food for hospitality. And I think really what we see is as more people come back to work, we will end up in perhaps a hybrid position, whereby I don't think everyone's going to go to pure micro markets, because some sites are too big for that. Likewise, I don't think anyone's going to ever really go back to how it was before. And so we see something in the middle, where it's a slimmed down on-site catering function, complemented by a micro market plus some delivered in elements as well. And really it's about helping contract caterers kind of get to that. I think there's two main challenges here. The first one is the perception around theft, which is kind of always the elephant in the room. And the second one is just general kind of integration with a client's and a contract caterer's kind of current workflow. And so diving into both of those, and I'll take the latter one first. Natasha's law is coming in, so you need to make sure that if you are now moving towards stuff like a micro market where you're using an application, that you've got those allergens displayed on the app, that it's well integrated with your existing systems, etc. So that's kind of like a big thing for people to consider. And then on the theft side, I think fundamentally this is just a mind change in how it's change management, and you have to get past this notion of theft. And I think what you have to say is, firstly, we're doing micro markets all over the world, and I can tell you that theft isn't a problem like people think it is. But even if you do have an increase in shrinkage, you have to look at this as you're running a commercial operation. And so long as you are experiencing less theft than the money you are saving on cashiers and points of sale, then it's worthwhile. And this is precisely the reason that supermarkets are doing self-checkout, and have been for several years. And I think in the catering environment, it tends to be even more controlled. You don't just have anybody that can necessarily walk in off the street, certainly in B&I, for example, and quite a lot of schools. So again, I think there's a kind of a real opportunity there. So that would be my kind of whistle-stop tour of micro markets.
Thanks, Max. Well, we'll come back on that, because I think the technology piece is crucial, isn't it, to this whole subject as well. Should I bring Angus in at this point? Because Angus, you're working on some specific projects at the moment, aren't you?
Yeah, that's correct, Chris. And
really, which markets are you finding responding to this?
Yeah. So really just to echo what Anthony and Maria and Max have said. So certainly we're seeing ourselves in new times, new markets, but it's how we adapt to the changes and to still capture the spend from staff at these sites, where previously we might have had a catering operation. We're seeing micro markets as a new way to capture that spend. Certainly with the technology from Max, it's certainly a safer and a more secure way. The points that Max picked up on theft, certainly echo them. It is a very, very low percentage, which if you look at in the grand scheme of things, the savings you make through maybe staff cuts certainly outweigh any potential theft. And at the end of the day, if someone's on a 50, 100 grand wage, are they going to risk their job for sort of stealing a Mars bar? So it's certainly it can be a bit of a barrier, but it's certainly one that we can help overcome. Also in terms of the quality of food, so just picking up on what Anthony was saying, some of the chains we're looking to work with in terms of the food, you can get some very high quality food these days, particularly with the iWaves for heating up meals. They've certainly come a long way in terms of the quality of what's out there. So we're certainly seeing a lot of interest in it, moving away from the traditional vending into a new city style marketplace.
Okay, some logical questions to ask. Anthony and Maria particularly. I mean, the exciting piece, I guess, to touch on Angus's point, is opens up the market to a whole range of new operators and partnerships, isn't it? Anthony? Maria?
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. Yeah, for sure. So I think it would be interesting to get Matt's take on this. I'm sure he'll agree with me, but if I'm not mistaken, I think the reality is that caterers are probably in a position quite different to what they found themselves in only in Q1 this year, whereby they very much were operating in the larger office space, whereas micro markets are now giving them the opportunity to operate in a smaller market space than typically they would have looked at previously. And if I may dare suggest, even being forced to operate in that market, because if they don't, they're potentially going to be losing sales. But absolutely, for sure, opening up new conversations for us that we typically wouldn't have had before.
I also think that there's real opportunity if you look at further afield than that as well. And interestingly, Chris, I read your piece on hotels and how they will become new community spaces potentially with almost the office space set up. And the net opportunity is huge. And if you look at spaces like that, and if you look at education as well, there's definitely a market within education, certain types of education. And I think you can be limited only by the size of your contact base, basically, because actually it fits in so many places. You talk about supermarkets, it just goes on and on and on. And I keep coming back to it, but your modular design is so unique and offers everybody an opportunity to have what works for them, that I think that, yeah, there's huge opportunity. I'd be really interested to hear actually from Richard and Matt and Ian about and Hamish about what their thoughts are.
Before we get onto that, I'll open up in a second, just a couple of quick questions. Cost, what's the kind of cost to setting up a micro market? I mean, I know, I assume it's going to change, but is it highly expensive, or is it, what are the key barriers?
Yeah, there isn't really a barrier, Chris, quite honestly, in my view, because as Maria has kind of alluded to, it's very much a modular. So you can build a micro market and the associated cost to form to a budget. So that's something that we absolutely work with the client, whoever that be that the caterer or the end client directly, as to, kind of what's been in place previously and what they want to have going forward. We also we can provide everything on a lease basis as well, which obviously in turn helps spread the cost. So again, there's a lot of flexible options around that. So, I think, to put things in perspective, I don't think it's an expensive option. It's just about educating the client to think about it differently to just a coffee machine or just having delivered in vending as such, because that's possibly how some people may deem it, but it's about educating them that this is more than that.
And the interesting thing is, isn't there, which I assume is the key, is the product and the fridges. I mean, obviously the coffee is crucial, and the beverages, but the product you can get in is going to be the key piece as well, isn't it? Because it's got to be engaging. Because when you talk about vending, obviously people have straight away creates an image, but actually this is a different ballpark, isn't it?
Absolutely, and that's why I say it's all down to the education piece and people becoming more aware. As I said earlier, I think micro markets previously and going back probably 12-18 months have been a sort of a big ungainly beast that not many people have known much about, and so it's kind of a bit of a fear factor as to how I implement that and the associated costs and everything that goes with it. However, if we can simplify it by using this modular idea that we've come up with, I really feel that will help take a lot of that fear factor out.
Yeah.
Also, the food offer can be really, just as it is in any workplace dining environment, it can be tailored to the demographic of the building. And the food offer that is available within micro markets now has evolved so quickly, and to a place that it's, as Anthony said, it doesn't look like it did 2 years ago. And there's so many more options now, so yeah.
Now this is obviously taking off in the US in quite a big way, and you're seeing real signs of real progress in this in the UK as well? Anthony, yeah. Angus? Yep.
Angus, do you want to cover off on that?
Yeah, 100%, Chris. Yeah, and I think Max, even you were saying yesterday, you're seeing it take off a lot in Asia as well. Was that right, Max?
Yeah, we actually started micro markets, doing micro markets with one of our partners in Asia 2.5 years ago. And it was a trend that was gradually kind of coming elsewhere. And yeah, as mentioned, now it's kind of one of the top things on the agenda all over the world.
That's interesting, isn't it? And what do you, and Max, on your side, obviously you've been working globally. What have you found to be the barriers when people are looking at this? Beyond the theft and beyond the
markets. So yeah, I would say the biggest barrier is definitely the perception of theft, which varies in different countries. Somewhere like Japan, the level of theft in general is really low, so the perception there isn't a problem. But certainly in the UK and the US, that's much more a concern. I think there's been kind of a couple of things. So I'd say one is being the full platform. So one concern that people have is they don't want to have 3 or 4 different apps on site. So one's a delivery one, one's a micro market one, one's a click and collect one, etc. So the concern is always making sure that you've got something that's really nicely joined up, a very unified, consistent customer experience inside a one-stop shop.
Yep.
And I guess the other thing that people talk about quite often as well, just like I mentioned, the integrations. So just making sure that that solution as well isn't completely sitting outside of the ecosystem of the contract caterer or the client, so that it's reconciled with sales data, menu management data, that kind of stuff.
Thank you. Hamish, can I bring you in here? Because obviously you say you've been looking at this yourself. Your thoughts on this whole?
Look, we did a bit of work last year on looking to supply into the micro market space and how we could partner with perhaps some of the big companies that are already playing in that sort of area, like Selector and people like that. You know, certainly observations that I have based on my past career in sort of contract catering was certainly about, it's definitely going to be a trend in the future because of the potentially the low footprint and the lower cost to having a full operation on board or on site. And that was attractive to us. I think it seemed to me, you know, the work we did, it was very dependent on the quality of the technology. And how integrated that was going to be with, you know, fridges, you know, picking items up, how easy it was going to be to pay through technology, and, you know, the challenges that appeared to be occurring in some of the sort of the startups of this was certainly what happens when the technology goes wrong, you know, and there were some issues around that, like all technological solutions. The thing that I think we were grappling with from a supply perspective to the micro markets was, what does the supply chain look like? And, you know, is it a fresh offer? Is it an ambient offer? Is it a frozen offer? And there was a whole lot of sort of challenges that we could see when we spoke to people. I don't think that they really had a really good understanding of what the food offer was going to be, because it does change from location to location depending on if you're in a city. You know, you can have a different food offer if you're in a central city location, because you can tap into the likes of a Pret or a retail type, you know, dark kitchen. If you're in a more remote place, it was a challenge. And then the whole dynamics around spends. You know, I was really surprised at how low the spends were in the micro market information I saw on the US sort of market. They weren't great, and that sort of threw some real, you know, challenges up just from a turnover of product in these environments.
I suppose the two are linked, aren't they? The products. I mean, if you get the product right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but there was some. You know, the spends per head and the take up from a spend per site population appeared to be at the lower end. And so therefore that led you to perhaps more of an ambient offer where you weren't going to have a lot of food wastage, which some of our products fitted quite nicely in that. And that's where we sort of certainly saw some real benefits from our perspective.
No, I understand that.
But, you know, the market information from the US, as you said, was, you know, it's a growth, you know, sector there. I think it'll be a big growth area in the UK over the next couple of years.
It's logical, isn't it?
They're very logical, and there's lots of positives going for it. So I think it's just getting that model right. I think.
Richard, can I bring you in at this point? How do you view the subject of micro markets and the growth of it?
Well, look, I'm a believer. Okay, so I've had experience in micro markets, previous role. I think there's a time and a place for everything. I think there's definitely a place for micro markets, and I think the time is probably now for people to start truly understanding it. I think there's two key routes to market for this, particularly in the B&I world. So you've got a micro market as an additional outlet on a site where you may already have another catering facility. And then you've got the standalone facility where maybe a traditional catering offer is not sustainable or viable. And each of those, I think, has there's positives and there's barriers to it. I think as a micro market, as a solution, as an extra solution in a bigger building, say if you're in a bank and you've got micro markets on trading floors, that there's a definite opportunity there, and it's a great way of reducing the amount of sort of touch points around the building. It's an additional service to reduce people queuing. So in the sort of post-COVID world, there's some definite benefits for that. If you've got production on site, you can then put hot fridges into them, so you can put hot pots of food that have been pre-produced or pastries, and you can really expand that offer, and the logistics around that is much easier. And if you're looking at a site that maybe has closed its more traditional restaurant but still has an ability to cook food on site with a much reduced staffing, then there's as you said earlier, to have a micro market as a solution and then build back up into the full solution over fullness of time. But there's a definite place in the marketplace for that. And the barriers around that are really quite limited. I think it's really around the people. The technology is there. Yeah, there's no problem with theft around this type of thing. It's not a problem in my experience. Obviously, the other opportunity then is a standalone catering service in a building where maybe catering was never viable or is no longer viable. And that, we've talked about the IT systems around that, and there's definitely, it's getting the right product mix and getting the right products in there, and thinking about health and well-being and people's new focus on health and the right product mix. It can't just be sandwiches and pasties to microwave. It's got to be a much more intelligent food solution. But there's definite barriers to the marketplace in this one, and this is around logistics and staffing. And this goes back to the US. I spent a bit of time out in the US looking at micro markets probably 3 years ago, and I apologize if my knowledge of the US is a bit out of date for this. But if you're going to go into the way that one of the big contract catering companies ran it, and you can't have fresh milk coffee machines up and running in every one of your sites at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning. If you do not have staff embedded on site, it's just not possible. So the way the American market was very much working was around, it's not fresh milk coffee. You have 4-day sandwiches, or sandwiches with a 4-day life, because they're delivered on a Monday. You can't clear them off a shelf at 9 o'clock delivered on a Friday. You can't clear them all off on a shelf on a Monday morning. So that offer in America is a bit different. There's lots of frozen products in it. It's longer life products, more ambient products. And I'm not sure that the UK is kind of ready for that at the moment. I think the UK expectation is it's much more fresh products. So it's the logistics that sit behind that, I suppose, I see as the key barrier. Particularly, from an FM perspective, I suppose that helps us slightly to support clients where we might already have other staff on site running integrated facilities. So if someone's got to be there to take the delivery, someone's got to be there to check the products, stack the shelves, clean, and look after it throughout the day. And if there is nobody there at all, or someone just comes in for a couple of hours a day on a route fill solution, that doesn't really give people what they need. So I think that's one of the key barriers, is about how it is set up and how it's logistics and how it's filled and cleaned and those types of things. Get over those barriers and get people on board, and that's a definite good opportunity for us all.
That's an interesting one. Anthony, do you want to answer the coffee one?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Chris. I agree very much with Richard around the concerns of fresh milk and how we have that live early hours of Monday morning. I also agree on the fact that the UK market is not ready for, or rather, indeed, is not that it's not ready. It's moved on from powdered milk and indeed food with long life dates on it. So there are machines out there that basically have a self-clean function. So providing that they are set up correctly, of course, there's always going to be some operator element needed, but I do feel that we have various methods and solutions around whereby on a standard office opening from Monday through to Friday, we have looked at plans whereby we can make sure that the machines are functional first thing Monday morning from very early in the morning, and then it just depends how the machines are closed down and then the cleaning regimes, but there are specific machines that can manage that for you, which we have within our portfolio.
Okay, thank you. Ian, can I bring you in at this point? Give your perspective on this concept?
Yeah, really interesting discussion and points. I guess, as we're coming out of COVID, both contractor and client are tiptoeing, finding their way through what life is like now in a post-COVID world. There are certainly changes to people's work pattern. So people working 2-3 days a week. So this solution could certainly help with those peaks and troughs, and certainly could provide something different, because typically in my contracts, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, getting back to some kind of normality, but Mondays and Fridays are still a little bit of a challenge. I guess for me, be really interested to understand where you've actually put these solutions in place, and you've moved from a traditional contract catering offer to a micro market. How have the customer reacted to that change? What sort of customer feedback are you getting? And I guess also for me, what's absolutely essential is it's about cleanliness. So if it's filled at 7 o'clock in the morning, what's it going to look like at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon? Quality of product. People will still have a perception. Richard, it was interesting you talking about your experience in the States. And I'm with you. I think, people, especially in the big cities, are used to a very, very good quality lunchtime offer with lots of variety and lots of choice. So quality is a really important aspect. Brand, people will buy brand, and just to make sure that it's plentiful. So again, if you're going to come in at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon and there's a couple of sandwiches left, it's kind of how that's perceived by the customers. So I guess my question back to Anthony is how have customers reacted where you put these solutions in place?
Yeah, thanks. So it's a mixed response, absolutely. And I guess we're not coming on here today as the experts. It's very much an evolving field as we're going, and I think partnerships like we're talking to Maxwell about what he can do in terms of trying to collaborate and bring lots of these different offers together via an app. A lot of it is about the experience, as you rightly say. So where the offer is relatively small, and indeed the frequency of the change of offer as well. So menu fatigue is something that is a challenge to manage. So irrespective if you're within just one particular brand, there's only so many variations of that particular offer. So menu fatigue is absolutely something that we're looking at to see how we can constantly keep that fresh. I think as well is how this whole debate got started was actually looking at working with the contract caterer where they've already got staff on site. So the management piece is using existing staff, so to ultimately save jobs. So whereby the client may well be saying, we don't want our fully staffed staff restaurant anymore. but actually can we use those staff in a different way to stock, fill and maintain a micro market, and thereby save those jobs. So I think there's a whole mix, and we're really, if I'm very honest, we're kind of, our micro markets of last year are very different to the micro market journey that essentially we're starting on now after COVID.
I think that's very, very valid. Very valid. Matt, can I bring you in here? Because I know Bartlett Mitchell's looking at this area as well, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think, look, it's a fascinating discussion, and I'm learning a lot as we go through and listen to the other panelists. So it may be that some of the stuff I say sort of is a little bit repetitious of what's already been said, but I think we see this as being an opportunity in two kind of areas, a short-term and a long-term play. In the short term, as has already been alluded to, you have the interim solutions for clients who are maybe a bit nervous about going back to a full-time offer straight away. So having that labelless solution as an interim is something that we're looking at. And as Anthony pointed out, the ability to operate in now smaller markets and customers who perhaps traditionally would have been unsuitable for a proper catering offer, we have the opportunity to interact with them. But long term, I think we're keeping a close eye on a potential output of COVID as the decentralising of office space. I mean, whether that's for environmental reasons, for reducing people's commute and saving money on office space, we're sort of looking to see, as offices become more decentralised, the opportunity for these traditional large catering offers may well be on the decline, and something like mini markets and self-scan offers are definitely going to step up and take its place. I mean, it's but for me, as Richard spoke about, logistically, that's going to be the challenge. So for me, mini markets strike me as something that works better when you have a cluster. So in already dense population hubs. So in city centres, if you had a cluster of 5, 6, 7, 8 mini markets all in a small area, that seems to benefit the dark kitchen or CPU model quite well, because the cost per delivery is going to be significantly reduced. It's when you start to get further afield into the more regional business parks where you have standalone offers, how is it you service that with fresh food? And that's where I think the challenge lies. I think, as has been said, pilferage and things like that and other blockers for clients is, from an economic perspective, it's pretty easy to demonstrate, I think, that pilferage is not really an issue. But for many clients, at least in my experience, the discussions we have is less around the economics. I think they understand that the money saved on cashiers is more than or more than covers any sort of stock loss. But it's more for them about the question of surveillance. Do we put a camera there or not? Is it appropriate to surveil our staff? And if we find out that someone is stealing, what are the ramifications? Could that person lose their job? It's an internal HR issue. So there's sort of more political and sensitive issues that it seems that we've yet to discuss with them. But but fundamentally, I think we're looking at that for those two key reasons: the short-term interim and the long-term trend towards technology and decentralization.
Very interesting. Anthony, out of interest, where are you finding you getting the leads at the moment? Is it in cities or is it outside?
Yeah, absolutely, 100% city location. Yeah, without a doubt.
Those locations trying to change the service levels.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is logical, isn't it, really? Maria, because actually, just coming back to you, it's a thing to touch on. Actually, the real opportunity of this is also new markets, isn't it? Because as you rightly say, pointed out, we've been talking about how hotels are adapting.
Yeah.
Spaces to be co-working spaces. I see Twickenham's just adapted a co-working space.
Yeah.
This could be a growing trend, isn't it? It's ideal for co-working spaces, isn't it?
Completely. I think that we talk about landscape and what's coming and what's happening, and never mind weekly. By week, week by week, it's hour by hour in some cases, and looking at new markets for this is absolutely what Anthony and I have been talking about, because it fits in so many solutions in so many different ways that I think the opportunity is huge. Even Stadia, it just goes on and on and on, and it doesn't have to be with the modular operation. It doesn't have to be necessarily, depending on the demographic and what's required, a fresh food offer. There could be a frozen option. There could be, the ambient chill. There are lots of different ways it can come together, and it really is the opportunity for the contract caterers and also Anthony to work together and get this into different markets is incredible.
Well, that's the interesting piece, isn't it? You're going to get new people coming to contract catering market in terms of feeding, in terms of retail brands, but vice versa, contractors can go into other markets as well.
Absolutely. Definitely.
You mentioned education earlier in schools. Can you say a bit more about that? Because how do parents react to that? Or how do parents react to that?
I think there is, probably a lot of us on this call are parents, and there is a concern. We're all concerned about our children's safety going back to school. And, I was up really early again this morning. My daughter leaves really early, making her packed lunch. Do I want to be doing that every day? No, I don't, to be honest. And I'm not going to be able to, because I won't be here sometimes. So, am I nervous about her eating in the dining hall? Yes, I am. Am I nervous about the people that are perhaps making her food? Yes, I am. And so this solution in education could fit very well. And certainly in universities, I know it already exists, but I think there's an opportunity, independence in some areas, if we look at sixth form cafes, but also in state education, definitely.
Because this whole subject does touch on confidence, doesn't it? How we build consumer confidence again, which seems to be the hardest barrier at the moment. Is that fair?
Definitely. Consumer confidence is so low. We're all consumers, and we all know how nervous we are when we're venturing out. We are doing it, and we recognise that we have to get the economy back on its feet. But there is nervousness, and the ability for this to be a low touch solution to build that confidence, it plays right into it.
Maxwell, coming back to you, in terms of technology, if you took this into stadiums and into large operations, how feasible is that?
I think the feasibility is a function of the technology provider. And it was interesting listening to Hamish earlier, because I think one of the things he was saying is that he's seen a mixed response or something like this. And I think one of the things that we found is it really matters who you choose as a technology partner, because there's essentially two breeds in the market. There's those that used to be an EPOS company, and they are now moving into being a mobile first, scan and go, order ahead type company. And there's those that kind of started as a mobile first, is like us, and it's all they know, and it's all that they did from the beginning. And it might seem like a nuance, but the difference is, from the beginning, we had to hustle so hard for the customer, because EPOS companies can actually be incredibly lazy. You have to go to that EPOS to pay, and there's no other option to pay traditionally. Whereas with the app, you've got to convince people to come onto it, and you've got to be able to then keep them. And where we've got to is, for the first couple of years, there were a lot of learnings, and it was really tough. And we had to build something incredibly intuitive, incredibly reliable, incredibly good, so that we get to a position where now we've got some sites, including micro markets, where 100% of checkout all goes through our mobile applications. And again, because we had to think in that way, there were things we had to do, like, what if the technology does go down? So we had to build a whole feature whereby if the internet goes down, then you can still scan and go offline on your mobile phone, and then it does delayed payment capture when the internet comes back up again. So it's little things like that that I think really help give the confidence that you can do something like this. But again, just to be clear, I mean, in the sites that we've gone live in, a lot of them are 100% of checkout with scan and go. And the results have been pretty phenomenal. And I do think it's going to be something that kind of cascades throughout the wider market quite quickly over the next 12 months. And
people seem to be embracing apps in a whole new way. Is that fair?
Yeah. I don't know if there's any other way to say it than I think, what frankly would have taken probably customers and caterers maybe another 5 years to get to this point, everyone's had to do in like the space of a couple of weeks. So obviously that's brought some challenges. There's change management involved, and it's happening very fast, but definitely it's a really interesting time. And I think a habit has been formed now to operate digitally, and I don't see that reversing when COVID goes.
If I may pick up on something that Maxwell said, I think one of the things we're quite excited about is the opportunity for data. And it's something that contract catering historically has struggled with, I think, because of multiple different client sites with disparate EPOS systems, and it's been very difficult to centralize data and to objectively look at offers, promotions, and things like that across the wider business. But provided, you know, if in a contract catering setting you can move the majority of your clients to mobile payments, then you have a centralized data source which otherwise wouldn't have been there. And I think that could prove to be quite valuable over the next couple of years.
Maxwell?
I couldn't agree more. There's nothing more I could say to that. 100% agree. Again, as Matthew's saying, before, it seems crazy to us, but before, caterers did not know the names of their customers. Just think about that for a sec. Whereas now with an app like this, for example, you now know who you're actually serving, what they like, etc. You can then do some really interesting personalization around that. And frankly, that's what customers expect nowadays, because they just expect that experience that they've learned from Deliveroo, the high street, that kind of stuff. So they expect it in the office, in the school, in the hospitals, etc.
Well, that's the point. I think on the high street, you know, in franchise format stores, it's very easy to roll out systems that sort of work across an entire network and provide data across an entire network. When you're inheriting and when you're 2Ping staff and inheriting IT systems from clients all around the country, it's historically been almost impossible to centralize that. So I think that's, for me, that's the exciting thing going forward.
I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because actually one of the things we've been arguing is that service will have a new breath of life after this. And that's what you're arguing too. You can suddenly create a much more personal service out of this period. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. I mean, I suppose it's tricky in that it's, you know, there will always be a place, I think, for that face-to-face personal service, but having data and information on customers allows a way of gathering the data in order for us to provide that. I don't think it's an eradication of face-to-face service, but it's allowing us to provide that better and more meaningfully.
And even may open up new avenues as well as we go.
And also, just on the part about do you lose that human interaction, I think the key here is that really you can split these transactions into two components, one of which is essentially admin. It's what do you want to order? How are you going to pay? Here's your receipt. I don't think there's anybody in the world that enjoys providing that, doing that, or either on the customer side or the operator side. There's then the second part, which is the experience. How was the food? How's the ambience of the place, etc. And I think what we're saying is you don't necessarily replace, we're not going to move to a world of sort of robots. But I think what you're doing is you can say, well, on the transaction side, we can automate, we can make it more convenient, we can personalize a load of that stuff using technology, which then means that the operators can focus much more on providing just a fantastic experience. And a great example of this is in some of our micro markets, they don't actually move to a completely cashierless operation. Imagine you had 10 on site, you might go down to just having 1 or 2 on site, but keeping that residual labor, and they have iPads and they walk around and they are now a customer support host or representative. And you can still justify that economically because you've made a load of savings, but the people that are left can now spend their time on saying, how's your day going today? Are you enjoying using the system? Is there anything else in the office we can help you with, etc. And so I think there's some really interesting opportunities here if it's played right.
No, I think that's very fair. Anthony, we've got about 5 minutes left. Can I bring you back in at this point to try and start to wrap up, really? What struck you from this session?
Yeah, it's for me, it's clear that technology is without a doubt the way forward in this. The other thing that we need to do some more work on is ensuring this consistency of good quality food. I think Ian has given that message loud and clear, as has Richard, that, you know, that the quality is absolutely the expectation, and it's about how we deliver that on a consistent basis. So they're probably my two key takeaways.
Maria, your thoughts on this as we get to conclusion?
Yeah, I think having everybody that's in today has been really beneficial, and the message is clear. You know, we know this will be a solution. We know that technology is very much part of that. I think that quality of food is imperative, but understanding your demographic and the experience of operating your site, you know what that is. And so you are able to tailor the food offer within the micro markets as you would in a normal service environment anyway. So that piece is there, but it's getting the quality right, Anthony. That's absolutely absolutely key, but not losing the experience. So the piece that Max was saying around, you know, having a reduced staff there, but actually they really are more hosts, and they're far more welcoming probably than somebody that's busy running around trying to serve you. So I think it's there. It's just about the finer details now.
Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? Richard, can I just bring you in at this point? I mean, logistics is obviously the key piece in terms of food, etc. How do you see this piece playing out now, your forecast?
I think, as I say, it's time and place for everything. I think it's an opportunity now. We need to do it. We can support our customers. We can protect jobs, and I think you've got to look at it in a slightly longer term as well. So there's definite short-term benefits for it, but in the longer term, how can we use the technology and continue with it? And I think there's sort of as Maria was saying, there's lots of other avenues for this. So particularly in the sort of catering B&I type world, maybe you're then using your micro market technology and the retail outlet around sort of focusing more on food for home. So can you maximize the revenue coming through the site to and help to protect customers? So if they're traveling from their work, they come into London, they come to their office, and actually they don't want to go to Tesco's or Waitrose or whatever on the way home. They just want to go home and get back to that safe environment. Can you then offer them fresh baked breads? Can you offer them fresh made on-site pizzas? Can you offer them a bottle of wine, salads, all that sort of stuff that you could then use that as almost like a mini Tesco's to go type thing. To maximize your sales, and you're keeping that sale in, you're protecting your employees' people or your clients' people, and giving an extra revenue stream. So I think it's a definite short term here and now. Let's make it work. But I think there's a clever way to use it into the future as to how you can still use that to maximize staff and protect jobs.
That's very interesting. Thank you to everyone. I think that's a fascinating piece. There's obviously a market here to stay, and it's going to evolve very fast. So look, thank you very much, and constantly up to 10 o'clock. Thank you for your time today. It's much appreciated. We have recorded it. We'll be releasing it, so it's a discussion we want to take out into the market. So I do thank you for that. And I look forward to seeing you again a bit later. Please have a great day. Thank you so much indeed for your time today.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Bye.